how, when you're alone and you turn off this show, do you push through the excuses, the habits, the fears, and the actual physical constraints that you have in your life right now so that you can make the pivot? Two modes to your brain that you need to know about. There's autopilot. We've all experienced that. You know, you drive to work and get there and you're like, oh, who drove the car? Oh my God. There's a part of your brain that its entire job is basically to execute your habits. Habits, big fancy word, means something very simple. Behaviors that you repeat without even thinking about it.
Who in here struggles with procrastination? Yeah, and the rest of you that aren't raising your hand are just procrastinating on doing it, aren't you? I know. If you're gonna have a nude party in my bathroom, at least clean it up.
Every entrepreneur out there goes through the mode of chasing the money, and then you hit the money that you need to make, and then you're like, I'm not fulfilled. What's my purpose? I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I went through that.
I need to find the light. You know, I did. Everybody does.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Mel, that's the answer.
So let's talk a little bit about procrastination. Who in here struggles with procrastination? Yeah, and the rest of you that aren't raising your hand are just procrastinating on doing it, aren't you? I know. You see, I always thought procrastination had to do with the thing I was procrastinating around, right? Like that procrastination has something to do with work. Believe it or not, procrastination has nothing to do with your work. Procrastination is a form of stress relief. Let me explain this. So let's say that you've got some stuff going on in your life, and heck, who doesn't have stuff going on in your life? Maybe you're fighting with your significant other. Maybe mom's or dad's health is failing and it's really, really upsetting you. Maybe you've got some financial stuff. You put too much of your savings into Bitcoin, and now that that's crashed, you're stressed out about it, right? And so you go into work, and when you get into work, you got stuff to do. You kind of walk in and you got this big stress ball that subconsciously is hanging over your head. And so you walk in and you sit down, and you know you got 13 phone calls you need to make. And you also know that you've been chickening out, you've been making easy calls, and there's a bunch of CIOs or other people that are higher level that you haven't been calling. And so as you sit down to do it, and you got the stress on your shoulders, your brain it starts to go, wait a minute, well, you want me to make a call to somebody that I'm scared to make? Absolutely not. I'm so stressed out about, can we just watch some cat videos for a minute? And next thing you know, an hour's gone by. And then, of course, what do? You beat yourself up. So the only way that you can break this habit, and that's an important word for you to hear, you're not a procrastinator. You have a habit of procrastinating. Big difference. Because if it's a habit, I can teach you to use science to break it. You see, all habits have three parts. There's a trigger, and in the case of procrastination, the trigger's always stress. Then there's a pattern you repeat, and in the case of procrastination, it is to avoid doing something. And then there's a reward. You get a little stress relief. The only way to break a habit, you guys, is not to deal with the triggers. You're never gonna get rid of the stress in your life. But you can 100% change your pattern of avoiding work. So next time that you're in a situation where you feel yourself hesitate, you spent way too much time checking out the highlights from last night's scores, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go, oh, I must be stressed out about something. Acknowledge the stress. Then go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I want you to count to yourself because I want you to interrupt the habit that's stored here, and I want you to awaken your prefrontal cortex. Then I want you to just work, just for 5 minutes. The reason why I want you to only work for 5 minutes is because your problem isn't working. It's the habit of avoiding. I just need you to start. And here's the other cool thing. We know based on research that if we can get you to start, 80% of you are going to keep going. I think you should chase what energizes you. Everyone talks about passion, legacy, purpose, blah, 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 blah. The one word to pay attention to is energy.
I love that.
That's it. Let's simplify this.
Okay.
So whatever energizes you, naturally expands you, feels like possibility, is exciting to do. It may be scary. That doesn't matter. It has to do with how it makes you feel.
Right.
When you were in your 20s, money made you feel good. It expanded you. It energized you. Chasing the money, that was the game. That was your passion. That was your There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. And I particularly want to say that to the women that are watching.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Because it is socialized into women not to chase success like that, not to go after the money. And so If what energizes you is amassing wealth, go for it. But and the reason why I say that is because people talk about the word passion or purpose.
Right.
And the truth is, it's not a person, place, or a thing. It's not. It is the feeling of being expanded and energized.
Right.
If you're pursuing your passion, it means that you wake up every day and are energized. So instead of trying to think, what's my purpose? What's my passion? What's my purpose? What's my passion? I don't know.
Yeah.
And instead of thinking like that, I want you instead to ask yourself, what could I do today that would energize me? What energizes me? If it's making money, figure out how to make money.
Right.
If it is making a difference, figure out how to make a difference. It could be in any single shape or form. But if it energizes you, that's what you need to follow. And what happens is that passion also, because it's energy, it dissipates over time. Because when you first start making money, it's f***ing thrilling.
Yeah.
But what happens is once you learn how to do something once, you can do it over and over again. And so it starts to become routine, which means it's no longer energizing.
Right.
Which is why every entrepreneur out there goes through the mode of chasing the money, and then you hit the money that you need to make, and then you're like, I'm not fulfilled. What's my purpose? I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I went through that.
I need to find I did everybody does.
Yeah.
And it's because you were energized by the money, and now you're not.
Yeah.
Now you got to be energized by the next thing.
Yeah.
And for you, it's clearly service. It's clearly making a difference. It's empowering others. And so when I look back on my trajectory, the thing that energizes me is making people feel like they matter.
Yeah.
It's that simple. It is giving people hope in a situation where they don't have it. It is shining a light on the path forward when somebody feels stuck in darkness. And now that I know that those moments are the things that make me get up out of bed and energize me, I can trace back all the way to the moment of being a public defender in Manhattan, 22 years old, straight out of law school, defending a kid who, and I met him for the first time, he had been arrested. I met him during night court in New York City. I was a brand new young attorney. This kid had been arrested. He had been arrested for throwing a champagne bottle in the middle of Times Square on New Year's Eve, and it had come down on a woman and had sliced her face open.
Oh my God.
And he had been ID'd and pointed at by her friends as allegedly the kid who had done it. And he was a junior in high school. High school kid on his way to go to junior college, mom working hard, terrified, absolutely terrified. And I met him because he had been arrested, and the family couldn't afford a lawyer, and I was a legal aid criminal defense attorney, and I was assigned to represent him. And I remember walking back into the cages behind the judge's bench, because if you look at a judge in a courtroom, there's two doors, typically, one to the right, one to the left. One of those doors leads to the hallway, which is what all the court officers and administrative workers walk to, that's behind the court system. The other one leads to cages that are behind the judge, which is where they hold the inmates as they're waiting to come in and get arraigned, or they're waiting, for the trial. And so I walked back there and I called out this kid's name, and I just remember him asking, is my mom out there? Is my mom out there? And I said, look, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to make you two promises. I'm going to get you out of here tonight, and I'm going to do everything I can. He was like, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I swear to God, I didn't do it. And I promised him, I said, I'm going to get you out of here tonight, and I'm going to do everything I possibly can to clear your name. And I remember the relief in his face. And he said, you believe me? I said, of course I believe
Gave him hope.
Holy shit. That moment, my heart blew open. And it's those moments where you give somebody hope, where you show them the path forward, where you're stronger and clearer in that moment than they are. So now they can be.
Yeah.
And that's what I show up and do every single day.
If you want to have command of your life, you must have control over your thoughts. In this video, Mel Robbins breaks down the secrets on how to have control over your mind.
The thing that's so difficult for most of us is how, when you're alone and you turn off this show, Do you push through the excuses, the habits, the fears, and the actual physical constraints that you have in your life right now so that you can make the pivot? And so I often say that I am not a what speaker or a why speaker. I'm a how. And that there's already incredible information about what you can do and why you should do it. And I find that the place that I get stuck is, okay, well, that's great. And I do a lot of thinking, but how do I get out of here and make it happen?
Our thoughts are our biggest killers of our dreams.
Totally.
They're the biggest killers or our biggest cheerleaders. Mm-hmm. And if we don't know how to really, I guess, I don't know, not manipulate them, but to really hone in on them, then we can have a messed up life. And I've gone through many years of self-destruction growing up just because I didn't know how to manage the thoughts. I didn't know how to, I was never educated on it really, on how to not control it, but I don't know, what is it?
What is it?
What is it? Yeah, not control it, but what is the word I'm looking for?
Well, see, I talk about it this way. So I like to simplify things because it makes it easier for me. I'm almost 50 for crying out loud, and there's only so much that you can remember when you get to be, when he's 33. That's a whole different ballgame. But I think about your brain as being in two modes. Two modes to your brain that you need to know about. There's autopilot. We've all experienced that. You drive to work and get there, and you're like, oh, who drove the car? Oh my God. Like, I don't even remember driving the car here. Well, you did, Lewis. You drove the car. But the thing is that you were in the mode of your brain that's called autopilot. Well, what is autopilot? Autopilot is the interior part of your brain. You'll hear neuroscientists and psychologists talk about the basal ganglia. Very important thing to understand is that there's a part of your brain that its entire job is basically to execute your habits. Habits, big fancy word, means something very simple. Behaviors that you repeat without even thinking about it. When you pull your pants on in the morning, I guarantee you either put your left or your right leg in first. And you have to stop and think about which one it is, don't you? But not when you're putting your pants on.
Right, exactly.
Because that behavior is what researchers call a habit loop. It gets encoded as a closed loop system right here. Now, the problem for most of us is that half of the day we're on autopilot. And that's not me making a guess. That's what researchers that study habits and study psychology say. That half of your day, you're basically kind of checked out and you're on autopilot. And when you're checked out and you're on autopilot, any behavior pattern that you repeat can take over. And guess what are behavior patterns that we repeat? Thinking patterns. So self-doubt, worry, procrastination, overthinking, analysis paralysis, fear. Those are all thinking patterns that are habits. One of the most important things that I want people to understand is that you're actually not a worrier. You have a habit of worrying. Big difference. You're not a procrastinator. You have a habit of procrastinating. Big difference. And when you understand that any behavior pattern, whether it is a thinking pattern like you doubt yourself all the time, or you get trapped upstairs noodling everything and you can never get started, or whether it's a behavior pattern like you drink too much, or you snap at your kids, or you micromanage your team. Every one of those behavior patterns and thinking patterns can actually be interrupted and replaced using science. Now, let's talk about the second part of the brain. Drive. That's this puppy right here. This is what you want. This is your prefrontal cortex. Drive is the mode where you're in charge of your thoughts, okay? It's where you are fully awake, you are present, and you are driving your thoughts and actions. When you're doing that, your prefrontal cortex is active. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that you need in order to learn new behavior, in order to do something difficult, in order to do something uncertain, in order to do strategic thinking. So I'm going to give you an example. So I'm a righty. If I were to try to write with my left hand, Lewis is going to torture me and tie my hand behind my back and make me do this, I could do it. It would look like I was writing with my foot. And if Lewis came up to me and said, hey, Mel, you want some bulletproof coffee? I'd be like, Lewis, I'm trying to concentrate. I can't do this. My prefrontal cortex would be el fuego because it is firing on all cylinders to communicate to my hand new behavior. So the thing that's cool about that is that you can use a simple trick the moment you feel yourself hesitate, the moment you've got one of those moments where you know that you need to, this is that moment that Lewis talks to you about where you got to step outside of your comfort zone and you've got to lean into your passion and you've got to really take some risks and you got to feel the fear and you got to do it anyway. That's the moment where you just woke up and now you got a decision to make. Are you going to drift back into the habits, or are you going to awaken your prefrontal cortex and drive forward and focus and do something new? And so the work that I've been doing and speaking about is all about the 5-second rule, which is a trick that I invented by mistake that helps you manually switch, no joke, your brain. It turns off and interrupts the part of the brain that is where all your habits and your behavior patterns are encoded, and it awakens your prefrontal cortex, which in 5 seconds flat allows your brain to help you change. And so, anyway,
I love it.
I was rambling on and on because you went on this thing about how your patterns can be destructive and nobody teaches us, and that's absolutely right. And what I want everybody to get out of this conversation between us is that you cannot control how you feel. You cannot control what triggers you, and the fact that you may rise up with anger, you may rise up with self-doubt, you may have anxiety, fill your body, but you can always control what you think and how you behave. And we spend way too much time trying to focus on manipulating how we feel about things and not enough time practicing the skills of controlling your behavior and your thoughts.
Because if you can control your behavior and your thoughts, then the way you feel will be different.
100%. And a lot of us are sitting around waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel courageous, waiting to feel confident, waiting for the right time. And that's not ever coming. Ever. Ever. You're not going to change your life up here. You only change it through action. And so to me, I did this interview with your friend Tom, and we talked about how motivation is garbage, and somebody memed it and went crazy. And so the point that I was trying to make is that motivation is great if you feel motivated, but it's garbage, and it's a losing bet to wait to feel ready. Because your body's not designed that way, and neither is your brain. And so I want everybody to understand that, first of all, you can't control the things that trigger you and the fact that you're going to feel afraid and you're going to feel doubt and you're going to feel uncertain. But you can always interrupt that feeling and take control in the moment and actually shift what you're thinking and shift how you behave.
Yeah. And, the bigger the dream, the more fear you're going to have. Even if you feel like you've conquered the fear of something, in order to grow, you've got to take on some new challenge. And there's going to be uncertainty. There's going to be some stress, or there's going to be some worry, or there's going to be some ego checking, and there's going to be some identity crisis.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be this fear that could arise. Always. I mean, do you feel like once you'd mastered this that you have no more fear?
Me?
Yeah.
No, the fear still comes, but I have 100% control of what I think and do. Right. So one of the things that is important for me to put on the table is that a lot of times, people look at where you are now. And so they'll see me on television, or they'll see that TED Talk, or maybe you'll be in an audience of 20,000 people in the American Airlines Center, and I'm on stage, and you're like, wow, that chick must have just been more than confident. I hate her. The fact is, that's not at all how I was. When I was 19, I started having crazy panic attacks. And they got so bad that I took medication, and medication was a godsend for me. I took Zoloft for 2 decades. When I had our first daughter, who is now 17 years old, the postpartum depression was so bad that they put me on Ativan, which turns you into a zombie, and I could not be left alone with her. So when it comes to self-doubt and to how we can torture ourselves with our thoughts, boy, have I lived that nightmare. And as I started to use the 5-second rule, which we're going to get into, and everything about my life changed, because when people first learn the rule, what you're going to start doing is you're going to start using the rule to push yourself to do things that are annoying. You're going to push yourself to get up on time. You're going to push yourself to work on your business plan. You're going to push yourself to make calls that are scary. You're going to push yourself to get to the gym. You're going to push yourself to speak up more at work. You're going to push yourself to put the booze down. Behavioral. And then you're going to start to actually use it to change the thinking patterns that are self-sabotaging. So I, 4 years ago, wondered, as I started to see myself go from facing bankruptcy to building a figure business. What happened for me is I started to say, okay, this is a really cool little trick to bring out the most powerful side of you, but can I use this to actually cure myself of anxiety? And the answer is yes, you can. And 4 years ago, I went off Zoloft and I started using the 5-second rule, which I'm going to explain in 1 second, to interrupt the patterns of worry and self-doubt, which, by the way, anxiety is nothing more than the habit of worrying, spiraling out of control. And body feelings triggering now the habit of obsessive worrying that turns into anxiety and then kind of escalates to panic. I started using the 5-second rule to interrupt my thoughts every time I would feel that kind of worry kick in. And because the prefrontal cortex is awakened when you use it, your mind is now ready to take on a totally different thought. It's a very different strategy than just trying to switch the channel on what you're thinking, because you're actually inserting the step that nobody talks about, which is switching the gears in your mind so that your mind can actually take and believe the thinking. So the 5-second rule.
Wait, first off, when did you
tell me.
discover the 5-second rule?
Okay, so 2009.
This is when you first tried it or discovered it, or?
Oh, it's a total horror show mistake.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So 2009, I was unemployed and feeling like...
You unemployed? How?
Well,
You
okay.
have too much charisma, too much passion.
Yeah, because everything's working right now. That's why. I'm not like this when things are not working.
Sure.
Ask my husband of 22 years.
Yeah.
What had happened is I had all these career changes and I got into the media business, again, by mistake. I had a coaching business and Inc. magazine was writing an article about coaches and they featured me in it and CNBC called.
Got it.
And that led to me doing some stuff with CNBC. And I spent a year still coaching people and then doing some stuff for CNBC. And then Fox called. And they were interested in having me host a television show. Now, you got to understand, I'm from North Muskegon, Michigan. Mm-hmm. I mean, the media business, Fox, LA. The closest thing I had ever seen to a celebrity, Lewis, was the Muskegon Lumberjacks, the farm team, right?
Right.
From for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, the
dad,
double-A team or whatever.
Yeah, my
the
dad was the
team.
hometown doc for the hockey team there.
Right.
So I thought,
The mayor was a celebrity.
wow, my life's about to change. I'm about to be a celebrity. Wow, we're going to solve all. This is amazing, you know. So I was originally going to be hosting a show for Fox where we were making over small businesses.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty cool, right? We show up, we do extreme home makeover for the office. Everybody's happy. We all know that doesn't solve business problems, but it makes for a nice television show. By the time I get to LA, they've changed the format. It's now called Someone's Gotta Go. And I'm going to be firing people on national television from real jobs.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
That sounds fun.
Horrible.
Oh, my gosh.
Plus, we haven't told the offices that this is what we're doing.
Oh, my gosh.
So you show up in Act 1 and you've got everybody all like this because they're going to think they're going to get new IKEA furniture and a paint job and this is going to be the best thing in the world for their small business. Now, meanwhile, I'm a 4th generation small business owner. So that's like my people. Grew up at a kitchen table with farmers and, you know, my mom at a retail store and my other grandparents were bakers. And so when it comes to like the heart and soul and what's so important when you launch your own business and how personal it is, I mean, this was like gut wrenching. So I show up, the first act, you kick out the owner of the company who then freaks out, then all the employees freak out. Act number 2, we announce that somebody's getting fired. And then that's the bad news. The good news is that I'm not picking. We're going to have you vote somebody out. So it's Survivor in an office place.
Oh, my goodness.
So
That sucks.
when I learn all this, I have a panic attack, even though I'm on Zoloft. And I call the guy that got me the gig and say, you got to get me out of this. Like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And he said, well, I'm sorry, but they've already cast the entire show and you're out there for 5 weeks and you don't have a choice. They're going to sue you. And I said, then fine, get me some Xanax because I don't think I can get through this thing. Like, this is awful. Luckily, we taped 2 episodes and legal tabled it. But here was the problem. I was attached to the show. And I only got paid if the show was shooting. So and being an entrepreneur, I also kind of put all my energy into this, shut down the coaching thing. Really thought that it also kind of negotiated a deal that was a sort of a back end deal, thinking I'm entrepreneur, always thinking about got to have a piece of the action. Yes.
Yeah, of course.
That was a dumb move. And I was in a contract for a year while they figured out what to do.
So you couldn't do another show. Yeah.
So, I just felt like I had made a huge mistake, and I felt really embarrassed. And I didn't know at the age of 41 what I should be doing with my life. And while it's neat that I had jumped careers so many times, I started to feel like somebody that actually wasn't successful at all because I didn't have a career track. I had a bunch of jumps from one thing to another. Now, looking back, it makes perfect sense. But standing in the middle of the mess, it just felt like everything was caving in. Probably just like when you were sleeping on your couch, feeling injured, and like everything I thought that was about to happen isn't happening now. Meanwhile, my husband had opened up a restaurant business. It had been his dream. He worked in high tech and came home one day after getting laid off and said, I'm never going to get on a plane and do a PowerPoint presentation for a company I don't care about or own. And I said, great, what's your plan? And he said, I'm going to open a pizza restaurant. And I looked at him and I said, was there a trust fund that was part of this marriage that I was unaware of? Because I'm not quite sure how we're going to
get the money.
Exactly.
Did someone die? You got an insurance policy?
Yes. And he said no. And I then said the most famous lines of our 22-year marriage, Lewis. I looked at him and I said, listen, buddy, inspiration is for strangers. You get your ass back to that job and you pay the mortgage and you forget this dream. You're not going to.
Wow.
So because change is scary.
Yeah.
So we fought and he won. And the first one was a real home run. And
He opened a pizza store.
Oh, he did. Yeah. 40 seats right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. He and his best friend. And they won Best of Boston. It was incredible. What do you do when everything's...
They make money, though.
They did on the first one. So what do you do when
do
everything's
another one.
working? Woo, let's go all chips in. Let's put in the home equity line. Let's put in the kids' college savings. Let's get friends and family. And because you're so excited, you think it's going to work. So you go big, big, big. Well, the second one did not work at all. And it did not work at all so badly that when it was finally closed, it was close to an $800,000 loss. And it meant our entire home equity line, kids' college savings, everything went right down with it. That was right when I lost the Fox show. So I'm unemployed. The liens start hitting the house. The phone starts ringing all the time, and it's collections calls. So you unplug the phone.
That would stress me out.
Well, you just unplug the phone.
Oh my
I mean, that's how you
gosh.
deal with that. But I remember I remember two things from that period of my life that were really painful, and one was having to call the town and tell them that we could not afford the $175 for our sixth grader to play soccer, so we needed to pull her out. And I remember there being times, because I was so afraid to look at the checking account, that I would stand at the grocery store and items would scan and I could just feel that wave of anxiety rising, thinking, I don't think the check card's going to go through. And so I would stand there. I always had an excuse, and it was to look at the person and go, oh, that's strange. It just worked at the gas station.
Oh, my gosh.
Because what would have been more empowering is to probably say, oh, well, I guess I don't have the money for this. Let's take this, this, and this. And just kind of like the easiest thing to do is to tell the truth. But I was so filled with shame.
Yeah.
So I started to develop this habit of hitting the snooze button. Because what would happen is the alarm would go off in the morning. And the first thing I would think about is all the problems that we had. And how awfully things had gone off the tracks.
You didn't want to deal with them.
No, and I also didn't know. I didn't think I could. And this goes back to the feelings. Like you think that you need to feel confident or courageous in order to get started. You don't. You actually just have to start, and that's the riddle of life. That lying in bed, hoping that you wake up some morning motivated to change, that's not the answer. You actually have to learn how to push yourself. You have to learn how to leverage the power of your decisions, and you've got to learn how to take action when you don't feel like it. Because every morning when I woke up, I did not feel confident. I felt like a loser. Yeah. I felt like the world's worst parent. I felt like I had failed at every single turn. I did not know if Chris and I could pull out of this spiral. I did not know if we were going to go bankrupt and lose the house and move from our community. I did not know if our marriage would survive. I knew I wanted it to. And see, this is the knowledge action gap. You can know what you want. You can know what you should be doing. But how do you make yourself do it when the feelings and the motivation isn't there? When all you got is fear? And so every night I would lie in bed and I would say to myself, all right, that's it, Mel. Tomorrow, it's the new you. Tomorrow, you're going to wake up and be motivated. You're going to get up. You're going to exercise like everybody says you should. You're going to meditate. You're going to get those kids on the bus. You're going to screw Fox. You're going to look for a job. You're going to cold call Cox Media, and you're going to do auditions. Come on, girl, let's go. You're going to take a cold shower. Woo! Here we go. And I meant it when I was saying it. Maybe it was the alcohol that was talking, but then I would wake up and I didn't feel any of those things. Mm-hmm. So I would hit the snooze. And I would hit the snooze. Now, why was I hitting the snooze when I knew it wasn't the right decision? I'm going to tell you why. And this is something that I was blown away by when I discovered it. You don't make decisions with your goals. You don't make decisions with your prefrontal cortex. You don't make decisions with logic. Do you know how we make decisions? I didn't invent this. A neuroscientist by the name of Damasio, who does his research in Brazil, who gave an incredible TED Talk and wrote about this forever and ever and ever. We make decisions with feelings. 95% of our decisions are made by how you feel in the moment. And that is the problem. You need to take control of the moment and leverage the power of your decisions and make them up here. Because when I was lying in bed, I wasn't saying to myself, I should get up because that's going to help me start my day right. I was saying, do I feel like getting up?
No, you don't.
No. Do you feel like making that cold call? No, you don't. Do you feel like doing that third set of reps? No, you don't. Do you feel like having that hard conversation? No, you don't. Do you feel like ending this relationship, whether it's in business or in your life, that is sucking you dry? No, you don't. We make decisions based on our feelings, and that is robbing you of joy and opportunity. And it is blinding you from the fact that how you change your life is 1 5-second decision at a time, one push at a time. And if you accept the fact that you may never feel ready and you may never feel motivated and you may never feel confident, you may never feel courageous, and that's okay, but you can still push yourself forward. What happens over time is as you start to see yourself becoming the person that takes action, that you start to see yourself becoming the kind of person that speaks even though your voice is shaking. You're the kind of person that has a bias toward moving instead of a bias toward thinking. Guess what happens? You build the skill of confidence and courage. And so what happened for me is I was stuck, Lewis. I was so stuck. We were heading straight for divorce. We were heading for bankruptcy. I knew I wanted to change things. And so one night I see this commercial. This is the stupidest story on the planet, but this is what happened. I see this commercial. And, again, I also was drinking too much. I probably had a couple Manhattans in me. Sure. That's my drink. I'm from the Midwest, just like you. Yeah. All right, little Manhattan there, little bourbon. And there was a rocket ship launching.
On a commercial.
Yeah. And I had this instinct, this innovation, this disruptive idea, right? Oh, my God, Mel. That's the answer. Tomorrow morning, you're going to launch your ass out of bed like a rocket ship. You're going to move so fast, you can't even think about your problems. Dumb, right? Mm-hmm. Totally dumb.
But
Seems like this is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I cannot believe I have this chick on my podcast.
No, I understand it. You got to get moving first.
Yes.
That's the thing. You just got to wake up at 6 a.m. or whenever it is and go into the gym. And when you're in the gym, you're going to start moving the first weight. Yes. And then you'll start moving the second weight.
Actually, people use the 5-second rule at the gym because you know how much time people waste at the gym standing around thinking about the next thing?
Probably 70% of the time.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the next morning the alarm goes off and nothing had changed in my life. I woke up to the lien on the house, the fighting with Chris, the unemployment, the lack of confidence, the lack of courage, the whole thing. But I did something I had never done before. I went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just like NASA. I actually counted. And then I stood up and I was like, what the hell just happened?
Uh-huh.
What? That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The next morning I used it again, it worked. The next morning I used it again, it worked. And then I started to notice something, and this is one of those things. So we have an 11-year-old son who has dyslexia, and when they finally diagnosed him, it was as if, of course, It was as if, like, how could we have possibly missed this? Are we the worst parents in the world? I mean, the kid can barely write. He can't cut his food. He doesn't like, no wonder he doesn't do team sports. It was right under our nose. And what I'm about to tell you is right under everybody's nose. There's a 5-second window between the instincts, the shoulds, the urges, the inner wisdom, the things that can change your life if you listen to it. Got a 5-second window from the moment you feel that instinct to move. And if you don't, your brain is actually designed to kill it. 5 seconds is all you have. The second you hesitate, and you feel yourself hesitating, that is a moment of huge power, because what's happened is you've just started to pull back from something that you need to lean into. And if you count backwards 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and this is the neuroscience behind why this stupid little trick works, counting is an action. Counting backwards requires focus. It's also not a habit for you yet. So when you feel yourself hesitate, you're triggering your mind that something's up. Like Lewis didn't hesitate when he pulled on his pants. He didn't hesitate when he's drinking his coffee. He didn't hesitate when he walked out the door to the gym, but now he's hesitating to make that call. Your mind now goes into a cognitive bias called the spotlight effect. It magnifies whatever it was that you hesitated doing.
The moment.
The moment. Yeah. Like all of a sudden you're like, hey, I don't feel like it. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'll do it later. Right. And your mind is doing it because your mind's trying to protect you. Hesitation signals a red flag to your mind that something's up. Just that small hesitation. It's a habit that we all have. Should you hesitate if you're getting a tattoo? Yes. Should you hesitate if you're gambling? Yes. Should you hesitate if you are signing a legal document? Yes. You need your prefrontal cortex for those things. You need to interrupt it, make a decision. Should you hesitate on making a phone call? No. Should you hesitate on speaking up in a meeting? No. Should you hesitate when you feel yourself starting to procrastinate and you know you got work that you should get done? No, you shouldn't hesitate at all. Should you hesitate in saying the thing that you really feel in your heart? No, you shouldn't. Should you hesitate and edit yourself when you're talking? No, you shouldn't. But we've all trained ourselves to. So it's actually this habit of hesitating. You start catching yourself. It's a huge moment of power because you have a decision to make and you got to make it in the next 5 seconds. Are you going to go on autopilot and get trapped in your mind? Or are you going to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and awaken your prefrontal cortex and drive forward? So I started to use this rule as I noticed that every day, all day long, I had these moments of inner wisdom where I would know that I needed to pick up the phone and stop isolating myself. I would know that I needed to call a bunch of media companies and start auditioning for radio show hosting gigs. I knew that I should get out of bed on time. I knew I should stop myself before I snapped at Chris, right? Self-monitor.
Yeah.
I knew I should not let the frustration be the things that was driving me. And so I started to use the rule all day long. Whenever I felt this, I should do this, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I would make myself do it. And slowly, 5 seconds at a time, my entire life started to change. And my husband used it in his business, and he and his business partner dove in. They went on to open 7 more restaurants. I went on to launch and sell 2 businesses and get recruited by CNN and join their team. I had a syndicated radio show that ended up winning the Gracie Award, which is kind of the female media, awards for the #1 talk show in the country. And, I never intended to tell anybody about the 5-second rule. First of all, because it's stupid.
Right.
I mean, come on. Count backwards. That's the dumbest thing.
Not stupid to me, though. What? Anything that works for me.
That's true.
You know what I mean? I'll take any stupid thing.
That's true. But I also was like, how do you start talking about something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I was asked to give a TED Talk like 6 years ago, and TED 6 years ago, not the brand that it was today. They weren't even putting the talks online yet.
Really?
Yeah, the TEDx talks were not online yet. And so that was the first speech I'd ever given in my life. If you want to see what somebody looks like having a panic attack for 21 minutes straight, watch that speech. I was backstage, and it was like one PhD after another going out there. I'm like, what the hell have I gotten myself into? This is the dumbest thing. And so at the very end, I wasn't even planning on talking about it. I say, oh, by the way, there's this thing I do. That's it. I don't even explain it. And you know why I didn't explain it, Lewis? I didn't know why it worked.
So you didn't have the science or the research. You're just
Zero. And then something crazy happened. They put that talk online a year later, and people started to write. We've heard from more than 100,000 people in 90 countries that have written to us that are using the rule in ways big and small to change their lives, to change their marriages, to change their thinking patterns, to grow their businesses. We know of 11 people that have stopped themselves from killing themselves.
Wow.
In the moment, there's a gentleman that we talk about in the book, and you can see his social media posts in London. He was a veteran, and he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and he boarded a ferry with the intention of jumping overboard. And he got to the railing, and he was standing there, and his inner wisdom kicked in. And this is another thing I want everybody watching to understand. I don't care what you're facing or how low you get. Your inner wisdom is always there. It is. And the thing is that we often don't listen to it. And so he's standing there intending to kill himself, and that inner wisdom kicks in. And he remembers the 5-second rule. And he goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and he turns and physically moves away from the railing and finds the first person working on the ferry and tells him that he's suicidal. Saved his life.
Wow.
He saved his life because he listened to the inner wisdom. And this is the other thing I love about this rule. It's not something to think about. It's a tool to use. So the part of the problem with a lot of the advice that I've found, for me personally, is that a lot of advice is all about kind of doing mental battle. And if I go upstairs, I'm behind enemy lines, and I tend to get hijacked.
Right.
So I love this tool because 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 interrupts those patterns. It actually prompts the part of the brain that I need in order to change. And it makes changing easier because I've now got my mind working for me instead of against me. And it gets me out of my head. And so I'm super excited to share this rule with people because I now know not only that it's working, just not for me, it's working for people around the world. And, you know, in the book, it took me 3 years to write it. It's all the science behind the rule.
Yeah.
It's got more than 150 social media posts in it. So you see stories from around the world of people using it to end procrastination, to build confidence, to deepen their relationships, to launch businesses, to explode the sales. Why does it help with sales? I'll tell you why. Because you can't sell by thinking. Selling is about action. We have groups from companies around the world, sales teams that put 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 up on the wall.
Really?
I'm sure they hate me.
That's cool.
Yes, because cold calling. It's a momentum thing. If you stop and think, the phone is not getting, the dialing is not happening when you're thinking.
Yeah. If you're thinking about all those no's you've been getting,
yes,
you're not going to want to do it again because it doesn't feel good.
Yes. And if you're in the middle of a negotiation or you're in the middle of a really difficult conversation, and again, remember what we said earlier? You cannot control your feelings that rise up, but you can always control how you think and what you do. So if you're in the middle of a difficult conversation and you feel those feelings come up that normally trigger you to start editing yourself or to censor yourself or to silence yourself, or to think sabotaging thoughts in like a business negotiation, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awaken the prefrontal cortex. Get back in the game. I'm still in the mindset that I was in 2008 when Chris and I went bankrupt.
Which is, I need to get as...
Scarcity.
Yeah. Man, really?
Yes, that's the big insight
No
I've
way.
had during this pandemic. Yeah.
Shut up.
Shut up. We're going to talk about it.
No, I'm just saying shut up because that's crazy to hear you say that.
If you get into a situation where you nearly lose everything, and look, I know you've been on your sister's couch, you've been down and out, you've had to reinvent yourself. We could be the reinvention twins, the two of us.
We could be.
Yes, and the thing is, though, is that if you get in that moment where you can't pay for groceries, where you think your car is going to get repossessed, where you can't pay for your kids' town soccer league, like that is low. When as a parent you can't provide what you want to provide for your kids. You don't ever want to be in that situation again. And so when I started to claw my way out of that, Lewis, and I started making money and Chris started getting his restaurant business back on the rails, I mean, we were still $800,000 in debt. It was 3 years worth of trying to make the ends meet. And when I gave that TEDx talk in 2011, that was 3 years after I discovered the 5-second rule. I had a full-time job with benefits, and we were still massively in debt. There were still liens on the house. And after that TEDx talk, which is what launched the speaking business, as people started to book me and I started making money,
I was like a squirrel with a freaking nut, man. A dollar came in, I'm like, put it away, put it away, put it away,
Right.
put it away, put it away. And every time a speech came, you know what everybody said as I started to explode on the speaking circuit is, oh, speakers get hot. You're going to be the hot speaker in, 2017, and then take everything you can get. And I
Because then
just
they're
said
on to
yes.
the next speaker. Yeah.
And so I figured it was just a fad. And so I said yes to everything. And I have become addicted to being busy.
Mm.
And it is driven when I'm present from making an impact. But if I'm honest, it is mostly driven from that mentality from 2008, the fear that this could all disappear.
Wow. We both went through our own, I guess, identity shift and dream death or ego death in 2008 with me from football and you with your career and everything. To give people context, because I'm just going to roll with this from what you just shared. Mel Robbins has been a friend of mine for years. You've come and spoke at Summit of Greatness. You've been on the show a few times before, and you've exploded in the last 4 years, really, with everything you've been talking about, from speaking to the 5-second rule to the Mel Robbins show, which was a big hit. But then, in the middle of pandemic, that dream just ended, and we're talking about, a big revelation for you, which is scarcity. And this is something we teach all the time, to be in abundance and don't have a scarce mindset. But you're saying that you feel like you've been in scarcity still for the last 3 years.
Yeah, like
in some way, obviously abundance of like, I can do everything, but in some way you felt.
Yeah, there have been modes where I've said yes to things, Lewis, because I've been afraid that all of my good fortune would disappear. And if I had to take a look at one of the biggest lessons from the pandemic that COVID-19 created, I call it the Great Pause, where all of us were forced to take a gigantic pause from our everyday life. And I need to qualify what I'm about to say by also saying that we have not lost a family member. We have not had the, we don't have anybody. My dad is retired, so we don't have an essential worker at a hospital or a grocery store. So yeah. I am speaking about the impact of COVID-19 without having lost a loved one. And so the Great Pause that basically had my talk show end abruptly. We got 5 minutes notice. We're told to evacuate CBS Broadcast Center. And all of a sudden, it was over. 139 people, no goodbyes.
Oh my goodness.
175 shows, no thank yous. We finished taping. I walked into the control room. My executive producer, Mindy Borman, turned to me and said they found COVID in the building. She started tearing up. Everybody, this has been remarkable. It's a wrap. We are the last show in the building. CBS let us finish taping. They're sealing off the building. I literally ran up
in the middle of a show.
Yes,
no.
This was March 11th, and we had already stopped down audiences, and so I ran upstairs to the apartment in CBS, which was like our green room. I grabbed everything that was possibly not nailed down. Don't tell Sony I took a bunch of the blazers. And I'm still a farm girl from the Midwest at heart. Grab them, go. Who's going to know that they're missing? And so and that was it. I mean, it was so awful because it felt like the biggest dream of my life, which was to host a daytime syndicated talk show and give advice to people 5 days a week on television who had no access to therapy, didn't have the time for personal development, make it entertaining, accessible. My whole dream, boom, in 5 minutes flat, done, no completion, disruption. That was it. And then 2 days later, Houghton Mifflin, which was my publisher for my next book, started laying people off, and they called me and said, we need to cancel the book contract.
No, I did not.
Yeah, they did. And then, well, in their defense, Lewis, I was a year late in delivering.
Okay, yeah. So if you would have done it on time, yeah, it'd have been out.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
You got a talk show to do it.
Dyslexia strikes again.
Exactly.
And then it started to be like, this speech is canceled and this speech is canceled and this speech is canceled. And basically, once Microsoft announced that there were no events happening until June 2021, the speaking business, at least the corporate speaking business, is basically on hold for in-person events for over a year. And in a matter of a week, I saw my entire runway shut down. And what's so interesting is you and I have both, in 2008, like so many of your listeners, the first recession just rocked my life to rock bottom. And when rock bottom hits, you don't have to hit with a thud. Oftentimes when you hit bottom, you bounce. And that's where I think the power is, that when the world feels upside down, you always have the power to make it right. When one chapter ends, you always have the power to write a new one. When, you feel like nobody loves you, you have the power to learn how to love yourself. And if there's one thing that COVID-19 has done, regardless of whatever devastation it has caused in your life, is it has forced us all to experience the great pause. And I read that in a Medium article, and I loved that idea of a pause, because I think in 2020, our lives have gotten so fast and so digital. And when you are forced to pause and get present and to slow down, you are reminded of what's actually important. And what's important is your health. What's important is your family and your friends. What's important is whether or not you are taking care of yourself and thinking positive thoughts versus negative thoughts. The world gave us a gigantic experiment where we got to practice and get to continue to practice the most important skill on the planet, which is emotional resilience, the ability to face hard and actually be okay, the ability to face the uncertain and redirect your attention on things that you know that are certain. And so I am so grateful that we had this time, because when I think about my family, so we've got a 21-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 15-year-old, we will never get these 10 weeks back again. It was a gift. As much as our two daughters who are in college were complete when they got home, it was a gift.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, for that generation, by the way, for them to learn, the generation where everybody gets a trophy, that the things that you love can be taken away like that. That there are things in life that are way more important than your prom or rush.
Or graduation.
Or graduation. Not to say that you don't deserve to mourn those things, but the perspective check that you got from COVID-19, and it really hit home because one of our daughters has a very close friend in college whose dad died, who's my age. And no prior conditions, nothing. And I think when change hits and it's personal, that's when the perspective shift comes. And so between COVID-19 and the fight for social justice that we're seeing with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the protesting going on, it's been a really remarkable moment of time if you pause for a minute and you reflect on the opportunity of this moment.
What is the opportunity?
The opportunity is to unlock the power that's inside you to create a better future for yourself, for your family, for your body, for your mind, for your spirit, for this country, for this world, for your community.
Yeah. I always talk about, since I experience many breakdowns, whether it be a physical breakdown or relationship breakdown or family breakdowns, I feel like in order for us to really see clearly, we need to break down in a big way. It's hard to make big changes when things are good or when they're so-so. It's even when it's like, it's not good, it's hard to make changes. It needs to be devastatingly challenging for a lot of us. Some of us maybe can make changes all the time, but for most people, there needs to be some devastation or near devastation, either personally or close to you, to say, oh, let me reevaluate, let me pause, like you talked about, and start creating a better future for myself. Why do you think that is in human beings that, if things are going bad, we won't change? If they're going good, we won't change. But it's almost like we need a massive breakdown, near-death experience, divorce, COVID, for us to see clearly to start changing.
Well, there's a really simple answer: patterns. So the thing about all human beings is that we are pattern learning machines.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel stuck or broken, I guarantee you, while you feel that way, you're not. You have a pattern of behavior or a pattern of thinking that is broken. Mm. And we need to be disrupted because we love our patterns. And even people that I know, like
even when we're in pain, even when we're in pain, we love the pain.
Pain's familiar for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, like you may be listening to Lewis and I talking, and you grew up in a super chaotic household. Maybe your parents argued all the time. Maybe your dad or mom were in and out. Maybe there was a lot of fighting. Maybe there was actual abuse. I don't know what was going on, but it was chaotic as hell. And so as an adult, you have vowed to yourself, you are not going to repeat that pattern. But what ends up happening is, because as a little kid, you observed, witnessed, absorbed the pattern of chaos in your nervous system, unless you go about the intentional work of breaking the pattern of chaos, you will create it in your own life because it's what's familiar. You won't understand. Why do I keep dating these assholes? Why do I go to these bosses that treat me like crap? Because you don't know what it feels like to be in a relationship with either a boss or a romantic partner or a roommate that is consistent, because for the first 18 years of your life, you lived in a state called, when's the next shoe going to drop?
Right.
And so wherever it is in your life that something is broken, there is a pattern that you don't see yet that is making you continue to stay in a broken situation. And so one of the things that you just asked, which is, why is a perspective change or losing a job or something like that that's so disruptive? Because those sorts of things, COVID-19 breaks every pattern.
Yes.
Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
Yes. Black Lives Matter breaks patterns of thinking that you weren't even aware that you had about privilege or being anti-racist, or what your Black colleagues and friends and relatives deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so having a breakdown is one of the biggest things on the planet, because what you get is you get a break from your own bullshit, and you can look objectively at where you are, and for the first time look ahead and say, well, what do I want to go create? And 9 times out of 10, if you're discouraged right now, if you've got financial devastation, if you're facing something that is making this moment in time as hard for you as life was for Lewis and I in 2008 during the last recession, I beg you, ask yourself honestly if what you had is actually what you wanted. The thing that you just lost, that job that you bitched about all the time,
that relationship that was bad to you,
yes, or the friends you can't hang out with because it's convenient and you're in quarantine. Like, actually ask yourself if this is what you wanted, or were you just used to it? Being used to something, Lewis, I think is the biggest reason why people don't change. I asked my mother. I love my mother. I love my parents. They've been married 51 years. Which is a feat, because my mom was a teen mom. But I asked her once if she'd go to a personal development seminar with me.
What'd you say?
Are you kidding me? Why would I want to change at my age?
Oh, wow.
I might discover I hate my life.
Wow.
I was like, okay, I'm just going to leave that right there.
Right. I mean,
I think being used to what you have. I mean, I even our son is, so I'm here in Vermont at my mother-in-law's place, and our son is going to go to high school in Vermont. And so we're going to kind of split our time back and forth between my mother-in-law's place and our place in Boston, because God knows what business is going to be like. And, why would you need an office after COVID-19? Right. Another amazing thing to realize, even that change, I notice my own agitation, my own anxiety coming up. Will I make friends? Will I like a slower lifestyle? What happens if Chris likes it up here and I hate it up here? My own mind because it's not something I'm used to yet, is making up stories to cling to the old way of life. This is a moment in time, everyone, please. This is the greatest gift. The greatest gift is this moment of pause where you get in touch with what you actually want. And if you don't have the skills, for crying out loud, look around and take an online course, because if you need skills to prepare yourself for the thing that you want, get them right now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awaken the prefrontal cortex. Get back in the game.
How has this rule helped you the most? In what area of your life? With your marriage, your business, in being more productive, in not having to, take drugs when you're worried so much?
Right.
Or or on stage, what's the area where you're like, wow, this has really had the biggest impact? And I'm sure all of it, but...
Well, the most important thing in my life is my marriage. So my relationship with Chris is like the thing that brings me the greatest joy. I mean, I'll just start crying thinking about it. Yeah. And
how many years have you been married?
20 years. We've been together for 22 years.
Wow.
3 kids, 17, 16, 11. It has given me mastery over myself. Like, I get so choked up just thinking about this. Like, I used to feel out of control. And this rule allows me to be the best version of me and to interrupt like all the garbage that can trigger you to behave in a way that's inconsistent with your values and your dreams. And so that has been the single greatest gift.
That's great.
That, and also, I think the other thing that's super cool is that it is a tool that certainly prompts you to act, but it is also a tool that helps you tune in to your inner wisdom. Like, you're not only going to start waking up, you'll be so in tune with those signals that come from your instincts, not emotional, not instinctual, that that you get a direct line to your inner voice. You get a direct line. All these people. One of the things that's always struck me is, so if you list all the people that you admire, right? Yeah, Richard Branson, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates. Like, everybody's got
Mel
kind
Robbins.
of this. Yeah, well, whatever. Lewis, for sure. If you list all those people, Jay-Z, Beyonce, like everybody, everybody that you admire is doing the exact same thing. They actually listen to their inner wisdom. They have figured out how to tune out the critic up here and trust the instincts. And, I have this saying about confidence that I've only recently kind of stumbled into as I've been digging into more research around the science of confidence and the skill of confidence. Because a lot of people think that confidence is a personality trait. It's not. It's actually a skill that you build through action. And a lot of people think confidence is a state of belief. It can be, but that's not where it begins. And so I say that confidence is the willingness to try. That's all that it is. Knowing that you may succeed or survive, but you'll still try. And to me, all those people that we admire most, that's what they're doing. They have the ability to tune into those instincts that are true for them. Because the fact is, there's only one you. That's it. And you matter because there's only one you, and there's only ever going to be one you. And your instincts and your experiences and your inner wisdom is a gift to the world. And every time that you tune it out because of the habit of hesitating or the habit of self-doubt or the habit of worrying or the habit of overthinking, you are robbing the world of that gift that you have to give to everybody. And you can use this simple, stupid, silly tool to train yourself to not only hear it, but also to develop the skill of courage to act on it.
Powerful. And is there any area of your life where you feel like you lack courage still?
I'll admit it's kind of easy. I think we all kind of go through those moments where you feel like you're behind. And I think social media is both an incredible tool, and it can also be one of those triggers that makes you feel like, look at how many followers this guy has. And I'm like so tiny compared to this guy right here. Like, it's easy to use technology and social media not for inspiration, but actually as a way to bash yourself that you're not doing what other people are doing.
Comparison and or whatever.
Yes. And so I think that I use the rule a lot for patience. I notice that my insecurity rises up because right now, look, I did a ridiculous number of speeches last year. I travel way too much. I don't want my life to look like that. It's a champagne problem. I get it.
Yeah.
But I also have 3 kids in a marriage that I love, and I really feel depleted when I'm not with them. And so I'm practicing patience as I make an intentional pivot in the kind of business that I'm running so that I have more of a life that I want as well. Yeah. So that's one area. I don't feel insecure as much as, the term deliberate practice, right? And the 5-hour rule where...
Deliberate practice, is that from the Talent Code?
Well, the deliberate practice is actually a psychological principle.
I think it was in a book called The Talent Code, but yeah.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a psychological principle that, the 10,000-hour rule.
I mean, deliberate practice is in
yes.
sports. Yeah,
so deliberate practice is this idea that, you could do 10,000 hours at anything and become an expert at it, but the way to do it faster is to do deliberate practice, which means you're practicing with the intention of improving, and there's a feedback loop.
Yeah, so you do 2,000 hours as opposed to 10,000.
Correct.
Right.
Like, for example, if you want to become an expert at guitar, learn scales. Don't just sit there for 10,000 hours and play the same song. Right. If you learn scales, you get the finger dexterity and the muscle memory and the neural pathway development. By the way. Yes, I saw your guitar over there.
So hard.
I saw your guitar. I always wanted to play guitar, but instead I forced my 3 children to learn.
That's good. You can just enjoy it. You just watch them.
Exactly.
My brother's, the number 1 jazz violinist in the world.
What?
Yeah. And so I grew up watching the most incredible,
Now, is he built like you, too?
He used to be even, more jacked. They used to call him the Incredible Hulk of violin because he was just
wow, snap the thing in half as
he would. He would, slam it like Jimi Hendrix style, yeah. But now he's leaned up a bunch, actually. And so he's incredible. So I used to just be all awestruck by his gifts. And it was unbelievable, his skill. And so I learned guitar. I taught myself when I was 18 just because I was like, I have to know something, in terms
That's
of
pretty
music.
Cool.
I can barely, I'm like a hack, but, at least I can do something.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I'm kind of in this mode of improving myself. And I'll give you one more thing that I'm working on. So I kind of think about my life and my work in 3 buckets. So we got this bucket here, we got this bucket, and we got this bucket. And so when you think about your business or you think about your passion or you think about work, I think about, okay, what do I need to do in terms of how much time and what actions do I need to take in order to develop the skills so that I can perform the work? So there's the deliberate practice that goes into practicing your skill and your
mastery.
And your competency mastery, so that when it comes time to actually deliver the work, whether that's selling or standing on a stage or writing a book or talking to people or selling real estate or whatever it is that may be your passion, deliver. This is the one I neglected last year. This bucket is, what are you doing to personally develop yourself so that you are the most capable, fulfilled, and satisfied human being, so that when you show up to do your competency and your skills and the delivery, that you as the human being are able to do that.
Yeah.
And so I've been spending a lot more time consuming content, reading books, watching, your incredible show, and learning from other people. And I think that one of the traps that we entrepreneurs get into is I was feeling last year anyway, like I was on a treadmill, and when I wasn't looking, somebody was coming by and turning up the speed.
Sure.
And I was only in this alley.
And increasing the hills,
Yes. And if you're my age, you need like a diaper when somebody does that. You're on a treadmill and a leash to keep you attached to it. Exactly. So I've been focusing a lot on this, and it's been interesting because you and I were talking earlier too about you going to India and some of the stuff that you learned in terms of the different states to be in. And I use one where I pay attention to where I'm feeling depleted versus where I'm energized. And here's the thing. You can be doing things that are really hard that energize you. You can be doing things that are really scary that energize you. The same is true with things that deplete you. There are things in your life that are really easy for you. There are people that you hang out with, by the way, that you've been hanging out with for years, but they deplete you. And so I've been starting to become more deliberate about how I distance myself from things that deplete me and how I spend more time and energy either doing or pushing myself to do those things that actually energize me. And this gets back to your message around passion, right? And that, the art and the skill of building a life that is guided by the things that you're passionate about.
I also know that as I set out to write down what I want to do, there's so much freaking fear that I have.
Why is that?
Because I still feel like I'm not worthy. I feel like I don't deserve it. Like it's old. And I think that's the other thing about patterns, everybody, is just because you identify. And for me, as a kid, for whatever reason, I have my own version of feeling invisible and feeling like I'm not good enough. And so my way of coping, both with my anxiety and being a survivor of sexual abuse and wanting love, which we all need, is I was like an overachiever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm the kind of person that's super busy and a go-getter because it got me attention. And if I was the one that was super busy and achieving, I not only got praise, but it also insulates you from other people not picking you because you're the one in a leadership role doing the picking.
Right.
And so there's a part of me at the age of 51 that is realizing that, these feelings of feeling unworthy and this hyper drive to try to achieve, it's all coming from a place of feeling inadequate or like what I'm doing is not enough. And
Still,
so that's
at 50, having the talk show, having a best-selling book, having the Audible originals, having the platform everywhere, having the impact, it still don't feel, being the most booked female speaker in the world, like you still don't feel.
It's so stupid. It's annoying. And human beings are annoying. We are stuck with this wiring. Like if you think about it, like all of the crap you believe is probably a hangover from age 0 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
That as adults, we walk around thinking the same stuff we thought as kids. And I can't stand that I feel that way, but knowing it allows me to catch it before it stops me from having an event or writing that next book or taking a risk.
What do you think the biggest fear is? Because you say not worthy or not feeling enough. Is that?
I mean, it's just people liking me. I think like being a people pleaser.
Yeah. We're so similar in every way. It's crazy. It's great.
I want people to like me.
What happens if people don't like you?
It's lonely, dude.
What happens if
the problem
99%? What happens if 99% of people like you and 1% doesn't like you?
Oh, I don't give a shit about that.
Okay, but if it's
honestly,
if it's 50-50,
I think that the work that we all have to do, every single one of us, whether you bulldoze, whether you people please, whether you avoid conflict, whether you're impulsive, whether you yo-yo your decisions. Whatever it is that is your pattern, the constant trashing yourself. I think the journey of your whole life is figuring out how to truly like and love yourself.
God, it's so true. I mean, I remember this was my whole life, was never loving myself and needing to go prove to others originally that I'm worthy. This was happening in sports and business until I started opening up and accepting myself and taking off the mask when I turned 30, talking about sexual abuse and just kind of saying, screw it. I don't care what people think about me anymore. This pain inside is hurting so much. It's not worth living with it. So I'm going to start sharing and allow myself to heal and allow myself to finally love myself. And it's so funny that we could just write a book with 2 words that says love yourself. And that's all the book needs to say, because a lot of us never remember to love ourselves, remember to acquire skills, which are important, remember to love other people, remind ourselves to take care of our health,
But if we don't love ourselves internally, if we don't think we can give ourselves a hug because we're not deserving of it, then none of this stuff is going to matter to the point of we're always going to need to do more to feel something.
Right.
It's
Well,
crazy.
nobody teaches you how to do it. And see, that's the thing. And I mean, if you look at human development, we're the only species that literally can't survive without another human being taking care of you. And so we are biologically hardwired to bond with other people. And that is from the very beginning of when you come out, bonding with somebody else and making sure they pay attention to you is your survival imperative. So you are born needing somebody else. And I think what ends up happening is there's never that kind of clean break or pass off between needing your parents to take care of you, needing your friends' approval to fit in, to truly having ownership over giving yourself what you didn't get, giving yourself what you needed. And that's the piece that I've been doing a lot of during the great pause, is slowing down, because so much of my busyness was fueled by, praise me, love me. Am I doing enough? Please tell me I'm doing okay. Okay, I can breathe now. I'm okay now. And when I slow down, and maybe it's a function of the anxiety, that's when things get scary, because that's when you've really got to be with yourself. Mm-hmm. And so it's in getting off the road, slowing down, recognizing that I'm super grateful for all the opportunity. And I know the work that I'm doing makes a tremendous impact. And I particularly love hearing from mental health practitioners that the 5-second rule, I've heard from so many people in inpatient psychiatric wards, Lewis, that use the 5-second rule in the videos we put on YouTube in their group counseling sessions with people. And knowing that it is helping so many people, it is like the greatest gift on the planet to know that it's making a difference. But I know that in this next chapter that I consciously create, I want to have more fun. I really want to love the process.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it so hard on myself and be gripping everything so tight. And it's really easy for me to see it in other people because I know what it feels like in here. I'm working hard to break the patterns that still hold me back. And the big one that holds me back is bulldozing. It's literally when I start to feel any level of tension. This is particularly true in my marriage. I'm married to a saint. Thank God Chris Robbins meditates every morning. It's the only reason why we've lasted 26 years. It's how he puts up with me. When I feel my emotion rise, I immediately raise my voice. Wow. It's how I assert power in the relationship. And I am so committed, Lewis, to breaking that pattern.
Wow.
And being a more fun person to be around and a kinder person to be around.
Wow. That's beautiful that you're getting this during the pause. What do you think was the biggest lesson you learned about yourself during the talk show experience before the pause? Because you covered so many topics and you had to research about so many things, and you brought so many people on, experts, but then just everyday people going through their challenges. What's the thing that you learned that was new? Because this is something you've been studying for years and talking about. And was there anything new that you were shocked about? You learned about yourself or about human behavior?
This is going to be first of all, there's two things. The first one, I'll make it deeply personal, and the second one will be a thing that I learned.
Okay.
The talk show experience was almost like it's weird. It almost feels like it didn't happen.
Really?
Yeah.
It was your whole life for 2 years.
Yeah, but 175 shows. It was super intense. It was almost a spiritual experience because I had dreamt about it for as long as I could remember. And I stepped onto that talk show set with such a level of mastery. And the reason why I had a level of mastery is because I could look backwards at my life and see that I had been heading to that moment for my entire life. That the ability to create trust and take a complicated amount of information and get down to the human connection immediately, that began back in 1994 when I was a legal aid attorney doing criminal defense work in New York City. My ability to understand what victims of domestic violence go through goes all the way back to 1986 through 1988 when I was a crisis intervention counselor volunteering on a domestic violence hotline.
Wow.
My ability to read a teleprompter had to do with being at CNN. My ability to work 18-hour days was a function of the reality TV show world. My ability to relate to somebody who had lost everything was a function of what Chris and I had gone through. My ability, like just everything all of a sudden was like, and it's why I can say with such urgency that you have to have faith that this is happening for a reason, that this is leading somewhere. And if you only just stay awake and you pay attention to what your body's trying to tell you in those moments when you have a signal come up.
How do you think we heal trauma if we don't have the resources to go to therapy or do workshops or whatever it may be? Even if we do have resources, we don't have the courage to put ourselves out there. How do we start to heal trauma within our body?
Excellent question. So we did a whole project for Audible Original called Take Control. That was all about, the thesis was this: any area of your life that you're stuck, I am willing to bet everything I have that you have a trauma pattern from your past that you've never healed. You got a boss that is abusive, guarantee you this has to do with a trauma pattern from your past. You can't succeed in the areas you want. You can't lose the weight. There's some pattern from your past. So the first thing is recognizing that you actually experienced trauma. And I am a huge proponent, as so many people are, of widening the definition, because I think up until about 5 years ago, most of us thought that trauma just meant, okay, you were in active duty, or you were in a huge accident or incident that was highly traumatic, or you survived some sort of physical, sexual, whatever abuse. Trauma is just about any kind of experience that you witness or you absorb that has your nervous system light up on edge and start warning you. So if you've ever had, you could have a critical parent and you just brace for them. You could have a parent that drinks like crazy and you brace at 5 o'clock because you know they're coming home. You could have been abandoned by a parent, or have a parent that was mentally ill, or have a parent that was so on your ass because they wanted you to be a pro football player. And so you were constantly on edge. It's when your nervous system fires up to a state of alert that now gets programmed into your body as a response. There's a reason why so many couples at 5 o'clock at night start bickering. And it has to do with the fact that at 5 o'clock is typically when a lot of parents 20 years ago were coming home from work. And that's when the arguing would start. And so what happens when you witness that or you feel it is, as a kid, you're now in a state where you're on edge.
Wow.
I see you rocking in your chair.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I mean, I just remember, it's funny. There's a lot of good things that usually happen to our childhood, but we just seem to remember a lot of the bad stuff. And it's because it's,
why, right?
Because it's trauma, just like in your nervous system, I guess.
And also your mind is wired in a way to prioritize the negative as a means to keep your ass safe,
to protect
from not experiencing it. Correct. Which is why you got to work on your positive mindset, because your mind defaults to negative. So you got to build up the programming to positive.
Exactly.
This isn't just woo-woo. This is actually science. People.
I know. So I remember, the memories of the past. I always have to remind myself of all the positive stuff that, my parents did all the time and what they were going through and giving them grace and all these different things. But I remember, when my Dad would get home, you didn't know what type of day it was going to be for him. You know, it was like either a thunder coming through the wooden floors with his wooden shoes and like being angry and upset, or it was like the loving father that would take me out and play catch in the backyard. So I have to constantly remind myself of like the positive, which I'm certain it was 90% of the time it was good, but those 10% of the time, you know, creates that clinching mode, like you said.
Well, let me explain what happens. So there's a really interesting concept called ghosts in the nursery. And so trauma patterns get automated because they're not experienced in your brain, they're felt in your nervous system. And so it's why you can have a pattern from your past, but be completely unaware that it's running your life right now, because it's stored not in your conscious thought, but in your nervous system. And you feel it in your body before it even gets into your head. And so there's this concept called ghosts in the nursery, which basically means there's all kinds of that goes on when you're little that you may or may not remember in your mind, but your body remembers it. So for example, if you had parents that were just stressed out and they come home and they've been busy and you're sitting there playing on the floor and there's toys everywhere, and mom or dad's reaction to a mess is to scream, that creates this kind of thing in your nervous system. Now, you may not remember that episode that happened on May 17th, 1972, but your nervous system remembers what it's like. So fast forward, you're now 51 years old and you walk in the house and there's a mess everywhere. And even though you have said, I'm not going to bulldoze and yell at anybody, my body recognizes the situation. So what do? You repeat the pattern you saw. And so what I'm working on right now is a pattern that is encoded in my nervous system. I was trying to create a video 2 days ago for Share the Mic now. Trying to create a video, and I'm like doing take after take because I want to get it right. And my daughter comes waltzing into the room and was like, how long are you going to be doing this? And I was like, can't you see that I'm working? I literally like screamed at her. And she looked at me, Lewis, and she goes, you have a real problem.
Wow. How old is your daughter?
20. And I said, I calmly said, you're right, I do. When I get interrupted, I lose control of the response. And I'm working so hard. And the way that and I'm clearly not mastering this yet, but the way that you do it is as you feel it rise up, you have to, you can use the 5-second rule, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can use just take a quick breath. You can notice the pattern, and you've got to create a pause between the emotion rising up and the reaction that gets automated. And for many people, the reaction, Lewis, is to run away. It's to leave the room. It's to avoid the confrontation. It was just easy, hold on, let me let the clock go.
Even though you hate being interrupted by anything, this is a great interruption.
See, I did. Like I didn't do the bulldoze. I was calm because it wasn't a human being. I'm only mean to human beings. A lot of people run away. They avoid conflict. They say it's just easier. But if running away and avoiding conflict continues to create a pattern where you feel invisible and your boundaries are tromped on, that's a pattern. And, here's the other thing about patterns. Running away and being quiet might have saved you when you were little. Because if you were quiet and out of the room, you didn't get hit, you didn't get yelled at, you were out of harm's way. So when you were little, it was a genius pattern because it protected you. But the issue for adults is that, again, we walk around with the patterns that we created when we were 8 years old in different situations than we are in now. And now we are completely a robot to these patterns.
I love that you had a great tweet the other day about boundaries, because as individuals, both of us who try to help people break boundaries, try to break their mindset that's holding them back, try to get them to become greater than their past, all these different things. You wrote a post that said, your boundaries are there to serve you. As you grow, so will your boundaries. What boundaries do you need to set up in order to help yourself grow? Why are boundaries important when we also have the mindset of like, you should be breaking your boundaries all the time?
Well, I wouldn't say that breaking your, like, I don't call the obstacles, or I call them excuses. And so I think the hardest boundaries, honestly, are the ones to set with yourself. To not drink during the week, to not tolerate the bulldozing and immediately apologize and try to do better, to not waste hours on social media, like all the things that the small promises you need to make in order to create boundaries with your old patterns and your excuses. To me, the hardest boundaries to set are those with myself. What was the question again?
Breaking, we encourage people to break boundaries. They feel like they're limited, but you talk about your boundaries are there to serve you. So obviously it's a different type of boundary, but
so here's the thing.
What boundaries do you need to help yourself to protect yourself, and which ones do you need to grow past that are holding you back?
I think that the definition with boundaries that has helped me the most is understanding that boundaries are for me, they're not for you. And the single biggest mistake that we make in any relationship, particularly romantic ones, but also work-related ones, is we do not express what we need.
That's so true. My girlfriend was telling me this the other day. She's like, I really want you to tell me what you need and when you want it and feel comfortable and confident saying it. And for me, I go back into trauma of past, like when I used to say what I want and need and it didn't get met, I'd get let down, my expectations, I'd get hurt. So I was like, screw it, I'll just do everything on my own, which leads to resentment or whatever else.
Yeah, how's that working out for you? It's like, so Lewis, that's an example of 8-year-old Lewis created a pattern that worked when you were 8.
Yeah.
But now that you're in your 30s and in a relationship that you really care about, you've got to identify the pattern and break it and replace it. And the good news is any pattern can be replaced.
Yeah.
Change isn't personal. It just feels personal. Change is just about identifying patterns and replacing them with new ones. That's it. And it'll take a little while because they're encoded in your nervous system and your default is to just do it yourself. But you cannot, as a rule, punish other people for you didn't communicate.
Right.
So I'll give you the perfect example. So Chris and I have been married for 24 years. And when I was before the talk show and I made my living mostly by, doing 100 speeches a year, I would be on the road 150 days a year. And when I would come home, there was always something that pissed me off.
Like what? Like, the trash isn't taken out, the clothes are here, or is it something else?
Oh, no, I'm way worse than that. Are you kidding? I would walk in after being gone for 5 or 6 days, and there on the island in the kitchen was a vase that had dead flowers. The ones that I had bought for myself a week before. And it was as if everybody in my family had been walking around the island for 6 days as if there was some dead flower sculpture in the middle of the island. And so I would come home and first of all, the only person that's really excited to see me is a dog. And my family did sit me down at one point and they said, you realize when you're not here, we have our own lives. So you don't put your lives on hold while, for us, and we're not putting our lives on hold. So it's not that we're not excited to see you, but we're not organizing our whole lives around when mom comes home.
Right.
Which is actually really good.
To be like the dog, excited and running up and jumping in your arms and kissing you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they don't. But I think that's cool because that means that they're independent and doing their own thing.
They've set boundaries.
They've set boundaries with me. Perfect. So for probably 6 months, I would get pissy and I would walk in and put my bags down and I'd grab the flowers and I demonstratively, how many times has everyone done this? Throw them out loudly, like,
everyone hears you.
Communication. Yeah, I'm getting my communication. Just throwing these dead flowers out, communicate to you that you should buy me flowers. Like, I'm not saying that, but that's what the body language is, right? How dare you? I have been off. I've been in 4 cities, and then you become a mart. Like, ugh, I'm disgusting when I tell this story. But this is it. This is like, so.
Well, I see you've got some lovely flowers behind you that look alive, so that's good to see.
Oh, that's nice. So, Lupin. So, I do love flowers. So finally, I just said to Chris, you know what would make me feel amazing? is if when I came home, you had just bought some flowers. Just go to just when you're at the grocery store. It doesn't. You don't have to order. Like I'm saying, buy the $5 pack of half dead tulips. Just something, okay? And then he said, why? And this is the most important part of expressing. And look, you don't have to give an explanation if you're trying to like cut off a toxic person. But if you want to express boundaries with somebody because you want them to understand you more deeply, give them the why. I said, because it makes me think that you are excited for me to come home and that you knew I was coming, because I'm starting to feel forgotten. So underneath the anger, Lewis,
Wow.
was hurt and feeling like I didn't matter. And so I'll be darned, I walk in and there they are. And I literally feel so seen. And, you know, the other thing to do is, and like another thing for us too, is like Chris and I learned on my talk show, because Chris was on it, and we did a show all about men and what men think and the secrets they keep.
Oh,
and
wow.
I learned for the first time that my husband prefers to have sex in the morning.
I think a lot of men do.
I didn't know that. Well, see, I didn't like it because I don't like bad breath in the morning. But
My
if I
girlfriend
know
says the
that
same
that's
thing.
coming,
My
like,
girlfriend says the same thing.
But I'm like, why didn't you tell me? And the reason why is because we're so funky about asking for what we need. We're so afraid of getting rejected or denied or whatever, or being vulnerable in that moment. But the greatest thing that you can do is ask for what you need. Your friends need to know what you need. Your lover needs to know what you need. Your kids need to know what you need, because then they can show up in a way where you feel seen, and then they're gonna feel incredible.
Yeah, and you can't expect people to know what you need, or them to know what you need by communicating it through anger and this frustration of whatever, like you throwing away the flowers. That way of communicating also is extremely unhealthy. I'm to blame there as well, and I think that's not a healthy way of creating love within a relationship, whether it's a friend, a family member, or a loved one.
But here's the thing. You want to know why? Let me let everybody off the hook.
Yeah.
Because here's the reason why this happens. And this is what I want everyone to know, what we're up against. So, Lewis, as you and I sit here talking about the flower thing, right? And you got to communicate your boundaries. As we're having this conversation, we are present and we're using the thinking part of our brain. When I walk into the kitchen, I am not thinking. Yeah. I am in the emotional, traumatic, nervous system, robot part of my body. And that's where your feelings and your triggers take over.
Yeah.
And if you can start to identify the bulldozing, the anger, all that stuff, you will literally change your whole life by just changing one or two patterns. The other thing, and you asked me about the talk show. The single greatest gift of the talk show content-wise is something called the word wheel. So I don't have it right here, but if you Google word wheel or wheel of emotions, you will find that if you ask somebody, name as many emotions as you can. Most people can name 3: happy, sad, angry. There's literally like 113 of them. From disgusted to hopeless to, and if you start with a core, this thing allows you to start with a core emotion and go out. Because back to the flower example, I was expressing anger. That's not what I was feeling. I was feeling invisible and forgotten. And so the word wheel is something that we used several times a week to help people go from the thing that they are expressing to communicating what you're feeling, which is a lot like the work that you wrote about in your book around wearing masks. Getting to the root of the core emotion you're feeling but not expressing. And that gets back to the pause thing. What have I seen? That I am busy. That I am so. Have you ever wanted something so bad that you become paralyzed?
Yeah.
I so want to end the mental pain and suffering that people feel. I so want to help people heal their minds and to have the power to create a better future. And I get so overwhelmed by how much I want to see that happen in the world that sometimes I become paralyzed. And what happens for me a lot of the time is I feel insignificant in my ability to move the needle on that.
Yeah, because there's billions of people who are struggling.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you do to make the maximum use of your time, to make the maximum impact, and to also create resources to create more impact? I get that.
I yell at my husband to buy me flowers. That's what I do.
I get the feeling.
The question was, what do you do when you wake up in the morning and you're having a panic attack? It is something I lived with for years, and it is terrifying.
This is new to me.
It's terrifying. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. And I want to tell you, you can actually get control of it. You ready?
Yeah.
So, first things first, let me explain what's happening when your body is in a state of panic, okay? So that you understand what's going on. Have you ever been in a situation in your car where you almost get in an accident?
Yes.
And immediately when that car almost sideswipes you, what happens in your body?
You tense up. You have a instant, what's the word? Adrenaline.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Like your heart's racing, right?
Yeah.
And your palms get sweaty. In the situation I just gave you, your brain has context for what the fuck is going on. So your brain goes, oh my God, we almost just got hit by a car. As soon as the car leaves, your body starts to slow down, doesn't it?
Right.
What happens when you're having a panic attack is you wake up in the middle of the morning and your body's in a state of alert, just as if a car almost hit you.
Okay.
But the problem is your mind has no explanation for why it's happening.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
That's the hard part.
Yes. So your mind gets really scared because your body is now doing something
Right.
that normally only happens when there's danger. But the problem,
That makes sense.
but there's no danger. But you don't know the difference. So you
Yeah.
now wake up, and I would get in this cycle where I would literally have panic attack after panic attack, and then I'd be afraid of having a panic attack.
Yeah.
And then I'd have a panic attack. So you're going to do this. When you wake up and you feel that, do not lie in bed. Stand up immediately. Start your day. Then as...
Even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
If it's 2 o'clock in the morning, yes, because lying in bed with all of that and deep breathing, it's probably not going to help.
Okay.
If you actually get up and physically move, your body now thinks, oh, she's getting away from the danger.
Okay.
What I want you to do is come up with an anchor thought. What is a thought? Give me describe a place where you feel really happy and centered and grounded.
Watching my grandkids.
Great. You're going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you're going to have a particular vision of you and your grandchildren.
Okay.
Super specific. And then just say, I'm so excited to see them tomorrow. I'm so excited
see them
to
every day.
All right, I'm so
I get to
excited to see them
babysit
in the
them.
morning. I'm so excited. And what's going to happen is by saying you're excited, and by counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you interrupt the patterns.
Right.
You awaken this. By saying, I'm excited to see my babies. And then you've got a picture of them. Your mind's going to start to go, oh, her heart's racing because she's excited to see her babies. Just keep saying that. You've got to give your mind an explanation to get it to calm your body down. In the car crash, your mind knows what's happening. You're going to give it a reason. Do you understand?
I do.
The other thing I want you to know, in the back of this book, last page right here, this is for everybody. The book comes with 31 days of video torture. Sign up for it, because I go into panic and anxiety very deeply. All that's happened is, for some reason, you've started to worry. And that worry has become a habit, and now your body is worrying, and that's now leading to panic. We can reverse it, okay? You know, I've heard a lot of experts say that fear isn't real. That is such a bunch of baloney. Fear is so real. In fact, There are probably things that you're afraid of doing right now in your life, in your relationships, at work. And the fact that you're afraid, that's robbing you of all of the experiences that you want to have in your life. I mean, if you're afraid to fly, that's going to limit your ability to travel and see the world or go visit friends. If you're afraid of public speaking, that's going to really limit your ability to express yourself and share your ideas. If you're afraid of talking to your boss or asking for a raise, that directly impacts how much money you make. Or what if you are dreaming of starting a business, or you've already started a new business, but you're afraid to talk to people and you're afraid to share your business with people? I mean, fear is something that stops us all. And that's why I'm here to talk to you, because it doesn't have to. Fear is real, but I am going to share a secret weapon that I have used for years to beat every single fear that used to stop me. Now, first, before we get into this secret weapon, I just want to cover a few facts about fear, what it is, what it isn't, and some things that you may not know about fear. So first thing, fear is a physical state in your body that is exactly the same as excitement. Let me say that again. Fear and excitement are the exact same physical state. Your heart races. You might sweat a little bit. You might feel tightening in your chest. You might feel a pit in your stomach. You have a surge of cortisol. It's basically the way that your body goes into a hyper-aware state because it's readying for action. Now, what's the difference between fear and excitement? Really simple. The only difference between fear and excitement is what your brain is doing as your body is all agitated. If you're excited, your brain's going, oh, wow, this is going to be so cool to ride this roller coaster. If you're afraid, your brain's going, no way, there's no way I'm doing that. This is dangerous. Get out of there. Don't do that. It's saying something different. So what's critical about understanding this is that we're going to use the fact that your mind is either working for you for excitement or against you with fear to your advantage. And I'll tell you about it in just a minute, how you're going to do that. Second thing I want you to understand is that you may have heard the advice, feel the fear and do it anyway. You may have heard the advice, oh, just try to calm down. Think positive thoughts. It doesn't work, does it? And there's a reason why it doesn't work. So let's go back to fact number one. When you're afraid, your body's in a state of arousal and agitation, and your heart is racing, and you're all like amped up, and you're hyper aware of what's going on, and you're freaking out a little bit. What is it like when you're calm? You just kind of chill, right? You got like this low arousal state. Very, very difficult to go from a state of agitation and being all jacked up and excited and weirded out to a kind of state. It doesn't work. It's like trying to stop a train by throwing a boulder on the tracks. It's going to make the train jump off the tracks. It's going to cause a disaster. In fact, they've proven in research that when you try to ignore your fears, it actually makes them worse. And they've also proven in research that positive thinking alone also can make your fears worse. So, what do you do? What do you do when you're about to go talk to your boss and you feel afraid? What do you do when you have to get on a plane and you're actually terrified of flying? What do you do if you got to give a presentation and you are afraid of public speaking? Here's what you're going to do. You're going to use a strategy, the same one that I use, that has helped me beat every single fear and turned me into somebody that is terrific when it comes to a high-stress situation. This is how you do it. You're going to use my 5-second rule in combination with what I call an anchor thought, and that is going to reframe what your mind is doing so that your mind goes from feeling agitation and making you afraid to reframing it from agitation to excitement. It works like magic. Now, I have used this technique for years, literally for years. And one of the ways that I want to introduce you to it is I want to take you backstage. I want to take you backstage to a speech that I delivered this year. And what you're going to see is you're going to see me behind, the major set. I'm about to walk out. You can kind of hear the crowd roaring. My introductory video is playing. My body is in a state of arousal. I am literally, my heart is racing, my arms are sweating. It's like you're going to see this. I'm going to tell you about it. And you're going to watch me use this same technique I'm going to teach you to reframe my nerves into excitement. Check this out.
All right, I'm about to go on stage. There are 7,000 people out there, and it's so exciting because what they don't know is they're about to learn the 5-second rule, and their lives will never be the same again. Now, I got to tell you, my heart is racing. My armpits are sweating. I have the exact same physiological feeling as when I'm afraid, but I'm not afraid. I'm excited. Excitement and fear is the exact same thing in your body. It's just what your brain calls it. Here's a trick that's proven by science that I use every time I speak. When I start to sweat, when I start to have butterflies, when I start to have my heart race, I say, I'm excited. I'm excited to get out there. I'm excited to talk to these people. I'm excited to share the 5-second rule. And what that does is it sends a message to my brain that tells my brain why my body's all agitated and excited. And that way, I don't feel afraid. Remember, excitement and fear, exact same thing in your body. The only difference is what your brain calls it. Go get them.
Now, I want to give you one more example, just to make sure that you really get how you can use this. So a lot of you have written to me about your fear of flying, and I can really relate to that fear because I used to have the exact same fear. But I use this same strategy to conquer it. Here's how you're going to do it. So first things first, if you've got to do something that really makes you nervous or that you're afraid to do, before you're about to do it, come up with an anchor thought. What's an anchor thought? Well, an anchor thought is something that's going to anchor you so that you don't escalate any situation into a full-blown panic attack or into a situation where you screw things up. It's a way for you to anchor yourself so you maintain control over what you're thinking and how you behave. So here's an example with flying. It's important when you're creating an anchor thought to pick something that is in the proper context of what you're afraid to do. So for flying, pick an anchor thought that has to do with the trip that you're taking. So if I'm boarding a plane to fly back home to Michigan, an anchor thought might be a picture in my mind of my mom and I walking on the shores of Lake Michigan where I grew up. That's a thought that makes me happy, it makes me excited, and it's also related to the trip that I'm taking. If you have a conversation that you need to have with your boss, pick an anchor thought about how you feel after having that conversation. Maybe it's you picking up the phone and calling somebody that you love and saying, oh my gosh, it went so well. Or, you walking out of the meeting and feeling like, yeah, I survived that conversation. I feel pretty good about myself. So now that you have your anchor thought, you're ready to beat the fear. How you're going to do it is this. So let's go back to the example of the plane. I'm on the plane, I'm flying to Michigan. We hit turbulence. My body's going to start getting agitated, right? I'm starting to get nervous. My heart starts to race. One of two things can happen. I can't control how my body might feel, but I can always control what I'm thinking about, and I can always control how I act. And so can you. So when I'm on a plane and the turbulence hits, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that's step one. And it's essential. And the reason why using the 5-second rule, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is essential is because that is how you switch the gears in your mind, you awaken your prefrontal cortex, and you trigger your brain that you're now in control of your thoughts. You've interrupted the fear. You've settled your thoughts, and now your brain is ready for that anchor thought. So then what I do after I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is I insert the anchor thought that I've already come up with before the flight. I start thinking about walking on the beach and being with my mom and my dad. And I start telling myself, I'm so excited to walk on the shores of Lake Michigan. I'm so excited to see my parents. Now something remarkable is going to happen in your brain. Because you've interrupted the fear, and because you've used the 5-second rule to assert control and awaken your prefrontal cortex, and because you have an image that contextually makes sense to your brain because you're flying to Michigan, you know what your brain does? Your brain goes, huh, Mel's excited to go to Michigan. Because my body is in a state, remember the first fact? Fear and excitement, exact same thing. What's the difference between fear and excitement? What your brain is saying. Using the 5-second rule and an anchor thought, you can actually switch the gears in your mind and reframe the thoughts of fear into thoughts of excitement. And because you have a vision that makes sense based on what you're doing, your brain buys it. You just tricked your brain. Now, Dana used this technique. She says she's never been so calm when she's been flying. And Sarah used it too. Now, Sarah wrote to us, she was petrified of flying, but utilizing the 5-second rule in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with an anchor thought, check out this photo of her on a helicopter tour in Hawaii. Not only was the tour amazing, but here's what's really amazing. If fear stops you, this will change your life. And for those of you that are afraid of public speaking, check out this photo of Carol. She also had a fear of public speaking. And by using this technique that I've just explained to you, 5-second rule, anchor thought, reframe your thoughts from fear to excitement, something incredible happened. She was able to beat her fear and give a speech to her nursing colleagues. And that was something that was a life goal and also something she checked off her bucket list. Fear is real. You can't control the feelings that are going to rise up in your body when you're on a plane or when you're talking to your boss or when you see somebody that's attractive and you really want to go over and talk to that person. But you can always control what you think, and you can always make a decision about the actions you're going to take. So the next time you feel afraid, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go to that anchor thought, tell yourself you're excited, and that, my friend, is the power of how you beat fear in 5 seconds flat. No one's coming to push you. No one's coming to tell you to turn the TV off. No one's coming to tell you to get out the door and exercise. The bottom line is, no one's coming. No one. You may or may not have seen the TED Talk that I gave a few years ago. One of the things that surprised me the most about that talk is that we hear from people around the world that write about one segment in particular. And let me play that segment for you because it sets up the conversation for today. And it's this concept of parenting yourself. When you become 18, nobody tells you that it's now going to be your job to parent yourself. And by parent yourself, I mean it's your job to make yourself do the crap you don't want to do so you can be everything that you're supposed to be. And you're so damn busy waiting to feel like it. And you're never going to. My son never feels like getting off his DS. That's my job. Get off the damn DS. Kendall, clean up the Barbies. If you're going to have a nude party in my bathroom, at least clean it up. God, chew with your mouth closed. We're not in a barn, for crying out loud. All right, dinner's coming. Get out of the pantry. As parents, and you were a kid, your parents make you do the things you don't feel like doing because you won't. Ever. Not now, not then, not ever. And even when you get good at something, you'll figure out something else you don't want to do. And then you'll plateau out and you'll get bored and you're like, I hate this job, this is boring. But will you look for a new one? No, you'll just bitch about that one. It's very, very simple to get what you want, but it's not easy. Wow. You know, that talk was 6 years ago. I cannot believe how little my kids were back then. And I also hate watching it because that was the first time I'd ever given a speech. So my voice is like really screechy and I swear, which I typically don't do on stage ever. So woof. Anyway, this concept of parenting yourself is really, really important for you to wrap your brain around. And let me dig into it just a little bit. I write extensively in part 2 of the 5-second rule book about how we make decisions. And the fact that we make decisions not based on what we know we need to do, not based on our goals, but based on how we feel right now. It's your feelings that make the decision for you. It's one of the reasons why parents are so important for kids, because if we let it up to kids to do whatever they felt like doing, they'd never go to school, they'd never do their homework, they'd never use their manners, they'd never learn to eat correctly, they'd never do anything. They'd just sit around and watch TV all day. That's the job of a parent. What most of us don't realize, though, and this is what I was alluding to in the TED Talk, is that when you become 18, when you move out of the house, when you're an adult, you have to parent yourself. Here's the rub. You're never, ever, ever, ever going to feel like doing the things you need to do in order to have what you want. You're always going to need to push yourself. You're always going to need to parent yourself. So what is the net advice on this? What is the bottom line? The bottom line is no one's coming. No one. No one's coming to push you. No one's coming to tell you to turn the TV off. No one's coming to tell you to get out the door and exercise. Nobody's coming to tell you to apply for that job that you've always dreamt about. Nobody's coming to write the business plan for you. It's up to you. And because you're only ever going to do the things that you feel like doing right now or that feel good right now, unless you understand that you've got to parent yourself, you got to push yourself, you're not going to make your dreams come true. You're just not. We're not wired that way. You weren't born that way. You weren't that way when you were growing up, and you're certainly not that way as an adult. And there's a tremendous amount of liberation that comes when you accept the fact that you're always going to need to give yourself a push. In this video, I'm going to explain to you the science behind why the 5-second rule works. As I said earlier, the 5-second rule is a form of metacognition that beats every trick that your brain plays on you. Most of us don't even realize how often we hesitate, start doubting ourselves, and get stuck analyzing things to death. I keep talking about how you can change your life in 5 seconds, and that's because in 5 seconds flat, worry can hijack your mind, fear can take over, and the smallest moves that you really want to make can seem terrifying. The opposite is also true. In 5 seconds flat, you can take control back. Do you know how often you hesitate and stop yourself? All day long. There's actually a neurological reason why change is so hard. Your brain is designed to stop you from changing. Let me explain. You see, change requires you to do things that are uncertain, scary, or new. Your brain is designed to protect you from doing things that are uncertain, scary, or new. What's your brain's favorite way to protect you? To trap you in your head by making you overthink. I've studied and interviewed the leading researchers in psychology and human behavior, and what they've taught me is that the moment you want to change, break a habit, or do something hard or scary, and you hesitate, your brain goes to work to stop you. Now, there's all kinds of fancy names for this. Cognitive biases, the paradox of choice, the psychological immune system, the spotlight effect. I could name hundreds of them. You don't need to know the fancy names. You just need to know one simple fact. There is a system in your head that is stopping you every step of the way, and the 5-second rule is the only tool that you need to beat it. So how does the 5-second rule beat the system in your head? There are 2 explanations. First, I'm going to give you the simple one, then I'm going to explain the science. At its most basic level, the 5-second rule is a tool that helps you take action. It gets you out of your head, and that's the secret. You've got to stop thinking and start living before the system in your head has a chance to stop you. Now let's talk about the science. The 5-second rule leverages proven principles in modern psychology, and there are literally hundreds of examples that I could point to, but in this video we're just going to focus on 5 of them. First, let's talk about 2 concepts, one called locus of control, the second called a bias toward action. So a locus of control is a foundational principle in psychology. You should Google it. Back in the day, researchers figured out that there are basically 2 kinds of people. People that believe that they're in control of their lives, and folks that believe that life is just happening to them and they're a victim of whatever might happen. Now, when you look at these 2 types of people, people that have an internal locus of control, a belief that they're in control of their lives, They're happier. They're more successful, more productive. So the question becomes, how do you create an internal locus of control in yourself? The answer is simple. It's called a bias toward action. So a bias toward action is a psychological principle that means you're the kind of person that has a bias toward taking action instead of a bias toward thinking. How do you create a bias toward action? You guessed it, the 5-second rule. The 5-second rule is a tool that will teach you how to take action. And over time, as you use it, you not only learn how to take action, you become the kind of person that operates with a bias toward taking action. And when you take action over and over and over on your instincts, on your desires, on your commitments, guess what you get? You build an internal locus of control. You become the kind of person that believes that you're in control of your life because you're proving it to yourself, one 5-second decision at a time. Let's move on to topic 2, behavioral flexibility. So just a few years ago, scientists thought that our brains stopped growing at the age of about 25. What we now know is that your brain never stops growing. We have the ability to learn new things throughout an entire lifetime. We call this behavioral flexibility. One of the things that's exciting about the 5-second rule and that we see from people all over the world is that when they utilize the rule over and over and over again, they not only create immediate change in the moment with a 5-second decision, but that over time, as they repeat the new behavior, whether it's speaking up in meetings more or it is pushing yourself to exercise over and over, that you actually create new habits and become an entirely different person. This is what your brain is designed to do in terms of its neural pathways and the way that new neural pathways can develop. Every time you use the 5-second rule and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, activate your prefrontal cortex and shift your behavior, you are not only creating immediate behavior change, over the long run, thanks to behavioral flexibility, you're creating lasting behavior change. The third principle is do good, be good. Now, this is a principle that I first learned about from legendary psychological researcher and University of Virginia professor Timothy Wilson. Basically, it means that you can't think your way to being happier or better. You actually got to do something. Now, this do good, be good philosophy dates all the way back to Aristotle, and it's based on the belief and now the proven technique that in order to change, you can't think your way to being more positive. You've got to do things, you got to act, and then your mind will follow. What is the 5-second rule? It's a tool that will help you stop thinking and start doing. Do good, be good, and then your mind will follow. The fourth principle, and that's the golden rule of habits. Now, I could spend 2 or 3 hours just talking about habit research, and whether you read Charles Duhigg's best-selling book or Gretchen Rubin's book on habits, or you watch a number of TED Talks, all researchers believe that habits come down to one golden rule, and that's this. You can never change the things that trigger you. You can't control your urges or how you might feel, but you can always choose how you behave. If you want to break a habit, once you have a habit, it's always going to be encoded in your brain. The only way that you can break it is to replace it with new behavior. There's also something in the research around habits called a starting ritual. A starting ritual is a repeated behavior that you adopt in order to trigger a new habit. The 5-second rule is so incredibly powerful when it comes to breaking old habits and adopting new ones because, number one, the 5-second rule and counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is a starting ritual. It will interrupt the old behavior pattern and it will trigger a new one. The 5-second rule over time, and this is really cool, actually becomes the new pattern of behavior. Instead of stopping yourself with self-doubt or blowing things off or overeating, you have a new pattern of behavior. You catch yourself. You gain control. You have confidence. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you do the thing that you know you want to do. And finally, the principle called activation energy. Now, activation energy is something that was first introduced into the field of human behavior and psychology several decades ago by a rock star professor at the University of Chicago that studied a state of flow. His name was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he was one of the first really to study human behavior, human performance, and he coined this term activation energy. He actually borrowed it from chemistry. And it's a term that describes this phenomenon. In order to start any kind of chemical reaction, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to create that initial spark. A lot more energy to start it than to keep it going. There's a direct correlation to you and me. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to just get started? How hard it is to get to the gym? How hard it is to get out of bed? How hard it is to put down the bottle when you go to pour a second drink and you know you shouldn't? That feeling, how hard it is to get started, this is what Mihai's talking about. You need activation energy to start the chain, to start to sit down, to start to get out of bed, to start to walk out the door. That's the key to creating any kind of change. This activation energy inside of you that causes the initial boom. And then what do we hear over time? Once you start, there's a chain reaction, and that allows you to keep going. So what's this have to do with the 5-second rule? Freaking everything. The 5-second rule creates activation energy in you. The 5-second rule is how you activate change inside of you. It is a tool. When you start counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you awaken your prefrontal cortex. You begin the process of changing. You push yourself in a new direction. That first push, that's going to be the hardest. Once you get moving, it gets so much easier. So those are just 5 psychological, scientific principles that explain the power of the 5-second rule. Personally, while the science is really interesting, I'm actually more inspired by the hundreds of thousands of people that we've heard from around the world, just like you and me, that are using this rule, not based on science, but using it in their lives and seeing remarkable results. The science explains it, but you're going to be absolutely amazed at what happens when you actually start to use this simple and powerful tool. You're not only going to blow up the system in your head and the tricks that your brain uses to stop you right now, you're going to shake up your entire life. Hey, I'm Mel Robbins, the creator of the 5-second rule. What is the 5-second rule? It's a form of metacognition that gives you immediate control over your thoughts and actions. Using the rule is so simple. The moment you feel your instincts fire up, just start counting backwards to yourself to switch the gears in your mind. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then give yourself a push forward. 5, 4, 3, yes! 2, 1. Counting backwards requires focus. And when you focus, your prefrontal cortex awakens. And by the way, that's the part of the brain that helps you learn new positive behavior patterns. I first mentioned the rule in a TED Talk. Since then, more than 8 million people have discovered the rule through that talk and its powerful countdown trick to take control of their lives, become more confident, happy, and even make their dreams come true. I created this series of videos to help you better understand the 5-second rule, the science behind it, how it works, and the specific ways you can use it to improve any area of your life. In this video, I'm going to show you the specific way that you can use the 5-second rule to increase your productivity. Now first, let's talk a little bit about productivity as a concept. Productivity is not about blasting through your to-do list and doing more. It's actually about doing less. Productivity is the ability to make progress on the things that matter to you. It sounds simple, right? I mean, just move the ball down the field on the important stuff. But it's not easy. Why? Blame your feelings. You see, you're capable of being more productive. You're just waiting to feel like doing what you need to do. And guess what? You're never going to crack the whip on yourself when you have a million other things that you need to do and you got people that are making demands on you. One thing that you must understand is that you have the power to decide what's important. And productivity actually boils down to simple 5-second decisions. Here's one that you need to start making immediately that will have a tremendous impact on your ability to be productive. When the alarm goes off, do you wake up early to work on your business, or do you blow it off because you don't feel like it, you're tired? Or do you stick to the plan to finish some important tasks, or do you mainline Facebook instead because, you'd just rather relax? When you change your decisions, you'll change everything. Because productivity boils down to the ability to make small 5-second decisions that put the things that are important first. And here's one 5-second decision that will make you more productive than any other. Get up 30 minutes earlier than you normally do, and push yourself to work on the most important priorities first. This isn't just me. Research shows that your most productive hours are the first 2 to 3 hours after you wake up and get ready. This means that for peak productivity, you've got to do whatever you can do to make sure the most important work to you gets done first during that window of time. So here's how you're going to use the rule. The moment your alarm goes off and you want to hit the snooze button, use the rule. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, push yourself out of bed. Then use the rule again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sit down and get working on the things that matter to you instead of checking your phone, instead of letting your day get hijacked. You see, the moment you feel yourself wanting to give in to distraction, you're going to use the rule again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to assert control and get back on task to the things that matter to you. It doesn't really matter how busy you are. We're all busy. If you really care, you'll find the time. And that's how you're going to use the rule, to find the time to work on things that matter to you. This is what Rachel did. She wanted to change her life, so she decided to make progress on what was important. And she did this by starting with getting up earlier, getting out of bed, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, focusing on what mattered. And as you can see, that small 5-second decision, getting up 30 minutes earlier, started a chain of events that changed her entire life. She lost 30 pounds, she bought her first home, and she reinvigorated her marriage. Why? The reason why is because she learned how to beat the feelings and excuses that stopped her, and she found the time to work on things that matter. That is the definition of productivity. Getting the important stuff done only works when you push yourself to do it. And when you push yourself, 5-second decision, to wake up earlier and start your day off right, you will be shocked by what changes it ignites. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to productivity. There are tons of strategies that I discuss that are based in research in Chapter 10 of the 5-Second Rule book, and how you can use all of this research in combination with the 5-second rule to not only become more productive, but to end procrastinating forever, to regain your focus whenever you get distracted, and lots of other things that are going to help you improve your quality of work and also your life. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe, because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you, so make sure you subscribe. Mwah.